Hello everyone, Mrs. Hamby here, and today we're going to solve quadratics by factoring. So if we're given a quadratic in standard form, how can we factor it to find where it crosses the x-axis? So you'll see here we have this is a graphical representation of this function x squared plus 6x plus 8, and we know that it intersects the x-axis at -2 and at -4. So those are your x-intercepts as well as your solutions and roots and your zeros. So just remember zeros, roots, solutions, and x-intercepts all mean the exact same thing. All right, so I went over this very quickly, but this is called the zero product factor property. And so basically, if you were to find, using the magic X, what multiplies to 8 but adds to 6, you would go, oh, 4 and 2 multiply to 8, but they also add to 6. So this is already factored for us. So to use the zero product property, we would take this x plus 4, set it equal to 0. So then you would subtract 4, so x would equal -4. That's why it crosses the axis at -4. And we're going to do the same thing to this factor, x plus 2, set equal to 0, subtract 2, so x equals -2. That's why -2 crosses the x-axis. And so basically we're trying to find where the x would be on the x-axis and the y would be 0. That's why we set it equal to 0, because the y-axis, we don't go up or down on the y-axis. We stay right there on the x. All right, so here's another example. And then we're going to use a graphing calculator to check this. So I'm going to go ahead and do this by hand, factor, and then go into Desmos and plug this into our Desmos activity and see if we did it right. All right, so remember your first step is always to multiply that first term times that last term to get the top of our x. So we're going to do 3 times -5, so we get -15. And then the middle is going to go on the bottom. So we want all factors of 15. So we want 1 and 15, 3, and 3 and 5. And remember, since this is a -15, we want which ones subtract to -2 or add to -2. And so we know the 5 has to be a negative because +3 times a -5 is -15, but 3 minus 5 is a -2. And so we're going to do our X box. And we know we put our quadratic term here, our n term here, and we found our splitting of that -2x. So it's going to be +3x and -5. And then we're going to go ahead and factor what can be factored out. So I just look here, what do these have in common? So we have a 3 and a 3. We can take out a 3, and they each have an x. And then we know this has to be an x because 3x times x is 3x squared. And then, oops, I forgot my x on this -5. Oops. And then I know that x times what would be -5x. So this has to be a -5. And then 3x times what would be +3x. So that has to be a +1 because 3x times 1 is 3x. And then you could just do this last little box, multiply those just to make sure. And -5 times 1 is -5. So it's kind of like your check, you know you did that right. So whatever's on the side, 3x minus 5 times x plus 1. And remember, we're going to set those both equal to 0. So we're going to do 3x minus 5 equals 0, x plus 1 equals 0. Add 5, So 3x equals 5. Divide by 3, divide by 3. So x equals 5 over 3. And then we're going to subtract 1, so x equals -1. So those are going to be your x-intercepts. So those are going to be the points 5, 3, 0, and -1, 0 on your x-axis. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and go to Desmos and type in this to make sure we did it right. And you can just go right here, graphing calculator. And I forgot what the equation was already. 3x squared minus 2x minus 5. 3x squared minus 2x minus 5. And then it automatically graphs it for us. We click here. If we did actually divide, 5 divided by 3, that is the decimal 1.667. And then we got -1. So those are the exact same answers as when we factored it. So that is just a little trick just to make sure you're doing it right. If you go and put it into Desmos, you'll see where they intersect. All right, let's do one more. And I think, let's skip that one. We don't need to do that one. Let's take this one and solve by factoring. All right, so we're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to take the number in front, which is a 1, times it by the back, and that's what goes on the top of our x, and we still want -2. So the great thing about that is we still have the same factors, 1, 15, 3, and 5, and we want it to multiply to 15, but add to -2, so we know it's got to be a -5 and a +3. And then we can do our box. So we're going to put x squared here, -15 there. We're going to split that up to be +3x and -5x. What multiplies so that we get x squared? Well, this has to be an x and that has to be an x. That's the only way you can get x squared. This has to be a +3 because x times 3 is 3x. X times what would be -5x, so this has to be -5, and use that last box to check. -5 times 3 is -15, so you know you factored that correctly. So you're going to do x minus 5 times x plus 3 equals 0, and then you set each of these equal to 0 and solve. Add 5, so x equals 5. Subtract 3, so x equals -3. Those are our x-intercepts. Those are also, we solved it. We wanted to know where is that equation equal to 0. All right, one more, and I think we got it. So we're going to go ahead and multiply 5 times 9. That's what's going to go on the top. Actually, pause this video. Let me see how much more we have. Oh, okay, that's it. Pause this video and try it yourself. And then hopefully you did it right. And then you can see through my example whether or not you did or not. All right, so we're going to multiply 5 times 9. That's what goes on the top. 5 times 9 is 45. And we want it to give us -18. So I'm going to list all my factors of 45. And remember, if you're not sure, you can literally just go to Google and you can Google it. You can say factors of 45. And Google will actually tell you all the factors of 45. So it tells you 1 and 45, 3 and 15, 5 and 9. You can also go in your digital notebook, and I have that paper for you as well. All right. And then so you can just go ahead, label it here. 1 and 45, 3 and 15, obviously 5 and 9, because that's how we got it to begin with, 5 and 9. All right, and then so which ones from this list, since the top is a positive 45, we want them to add to a negative 18. So we know it has to be 3 and 5, because when we add those, we get 18. But since we want it negative, it has to be a negative 3 and a negative 5. Okay, we're going to go ahead and put in our box. Remember, a quadratic term in that first box, the constant in the last box, and then negative 18 is split up to these two factors. So it's going to be negative 3x and negative 15x. All right, and so if I look here or this way, we look to see what we have in common. We have 5 and 3. There's nothing that factors into both of them, so we can only take out an x. Same thing here. We look at 5 and negative 15. What do they have in common? Well, they both have a 5 in it and an x. And so x times 5x is 5x squared. X times what would give us negative 3x? So that has to be negative 3. And then 5x times what would give us negative 15x? That would also be a negative 3, because 5x times 3 is negative 15x. Then we multiply 3 times 3 is a positive 9. Check, we know we did it right. So it factored is going to be x minus 3 times 5x minus 3. And remember, we want to set it equal to 0 and solve. So we're going to do x minus 3 equals 0 at 3. So x equals 3, and then 5x minus 3 equals 0 at 3. So 5x equals 3, divide by 5. So those are our two answers, 3 and 3/5. All right, hopefully that helps you with factoring and solving by factoring. If you need help, just